Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. All right, Aaron Childress, welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. So happy to have you on today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's, I love to bring people on the show. Everybody that comes on is super interesting to me, but this one's going to be a little bit more in depth, right? This is going to be more about mental health, probably some spiritual health, and definitely leadership, how to lead yourself and potentially lead others. But I decided to go a little more heavy hitting this time on this podcast. So if you're just tuning in, know that we're going to go some places. We're going to talk about a thing or two on this. And I think it could be very relevant to whoever's listening, plus then also people that in your life, because I think we all either have dealt with this personally or have people in our lives that deal with the issue that we're about to talk about. But I'm just going to give everybody the title of your book, and then I'm going to want to jump into your background about you, how you how you came about writing this book. And it is, I believe, I know it's on Amazon now, and hopefully it'll be an Amazon bestseller. That's what we're all hoping for, right?
Yeah.
But the title of the book is "This is What I Learned After I Killed Myself." That's the title of the book, right? And I think there was a little bit of controversy with Amazon and that title. Is that correct?
Yes, there was. They actually pulled my advertising there for a little while. And then when I talked to them about it, they backtracked a little bit and said, look, now that they realize what it's about, it's not a negativity book. They said, okay, you can advertise. Just be careful how you address the topic in your ad description. So They let me back on.
Yep. Good. I'm glad. And so as the title of the book speaks to, you committed suicide, and more than an attempt, right?
Yeah.
But let's not start there. I'd like to start the story before there. So let's go back to the womb. No, let's not go that far back, but let's go back into wherever you feel comfortable. You kind of want to start this maybe journey down this path and then we'll get to that event, and then we'll move that forward, because I think this is just very valuable information we're sharing today. So where would you like to start on that path?
Well, I'll do what I do in my keynotes. I'll kind of start you off where it all started. For me, surprisingly, a lot of this started when I was a child. I don't think that's surprising to a lot of people, but to me, it was surprising when I finally learned that later on in life. But I can remember all the way back 5 years old, getting tricked into going in a tree house, and the kids kicked me out, started laughing at me. And then a couple years later in 5th grade, I remember I was really bullied in school is what I'm getting at.
Okay.
I was bullied, made fun of. I grew up in Houston, Texas, and right up next to Johnson Space Center.
Okay.
If you know anything about that area, it's where we were at. There was poor and rich, and we were the poor. My dad was bagging groceries going to college. My mom was just getting her start in engineering. She's a pioneer for women in engineering right now, but at the time she was just starting.
Right.
So I was getting bullied and made fun of at school because I was the poor kid. And the kids there their parents were literally rocket scientists. And,
right. Right.
And it just got to the point where, I was getting beat up a lot and bullied. We moved to Wichita, Kansas, and it continued there, and never really got my foothold in any friend groups. I had little friends here and there, but no foothold in a friend group. And then from there, I graduated at 16 years old, and I like to tell that story because people think that makes me brilliant. But it doesn't. I did it because I just wanted to get out of school. I was tired of being beat up, and I do. Go ahead.
And you look, and we haven't met face to face. I saw some of the stuff you were posting on Facebook, and I reached out to you and wanted to have you on the podcast because I have dealt with thoughts along these lines, and I've talked to others that COVID triggered a lot of stuff for a lot of people. But you look like a fairly big guy.
I'm not small. I'm pretty athletic, but I was a late bloomer, as you would say.
Okay.
When I graduated high school at 16 years old, I was probably about 5'3", 5'4", about 120 pounds.
Okay.
And then I grew up about 16 and 17 years old. I was in college actually at that age. At that time, I kind of grew up and I became, what I am now, about 6 foot, and then 220 pounds. So.
Right. I was gonna say, I don't think if we were, hanging out, and I don't think there'd be a bully situation unless it was
No.
you bullying me. I'm like, you're
No,
you're a bigger boy. I'll put
Yeah,
it that way. I mean, you're not.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of hard to push you around at this point, right?
Well, it is. I run into kids from high school that used to bully me, and I'm not a giant guy at all. I'm not big, but when you go from they remember me as a little 5'3" small guy with getting his teeth broken every day, and now I walk up to him and I'm like 6 foot, and a little bit more weight, a little bit more meat on the bones, and they don't recognize me. Plus, I got a beard. I didn't have a beard. Right. So I dealt with it a lot in high school and in school, and came out of it and into 9/11 happened, right? So 9/11 happens, and I joined the Marine Corps, and so I joined the Marine Corps, and from there, I finally get a friend group. And this is the way I describe it to people. I finally have this friend group, and everything's going fine. I mean, as fine as it can go in Marine Corps infantry. And about 2004, late 2004, I injured myself pretty badly. Need some surgery and repair, and it was almost instantaneous from the time I get hurt up until almost exactly a year later. It was just sequential, just one after the other. About 20 of my friends were killed.
Gosh. In the Corps?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. 20.
In different places. You got
holy shit. Yeah.
Fallujah. You got all different places that they were, and
this was your tribe, right? These are your people, right?
Yeah, these
were
brothers,
right?
Yeah, my best friend. In fact, my best friend and roommate was one of them that died. And, I had a couple other very close. I mean, they were all very close, but as far as like core center group, there was quite a few of those that I lost, and guys getting wounded. And then it just became I wanted to re-enlist. I wanted to spend my whole career in the Marine Corps. And next thing I know, I'm just blackout drunk constantly. And I leave. I guess I left the Marine Corps. I'm pretty sure I did, because I wasn't there anymore, but I don't remember.
you okay.
I
so
don't
how
remember.
how many years did you serve then?
4. I did my full contract.
Okay, you did. Okay, gotcha. And then
did my full thing. But my last year, I was completely. I mean, I was going through surgeries and rehab, so I didn't do anything my last year. They put the foot back together, and I left, and I did the most responsible thing that a individual that's in like pure grief, losing 20 people violently in a year. I did the best thing you could possibly do, and I went ahead and got in a relationship, got married right away. And because that's just so great. And awesome lady, but I wasn't ready to be in a relationship, and that I was an absentee father and husband at home, right in front of me. And that caused a lot of friction in the marriage. Things weren't going well. I somehow still was able to work job to job, but I was struggling at work, in and out of jobs. Landed my dream job, which was a college baseball head coach.
Oh, wow.
After years of doing that, and then it finally all cracked. I lose my job as a coach in 2012, about 7 years after I got out of the Marine Corps. And I just snapped. I had all these things, the 20 friends, being bullied growing up, my dream job going away, my marriage going away, nothing was working. And here I was, a 33-year-old man, and it was like, there's nothing left. There's nothing left to do. And everything I love is gone. So, what I did is I grabbed a electrical cord, walked into my garage, and strung it up on the rack and hung myself.
And when you say rack, you're talking about where the garage door opener, where the garage door rails are?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the rail.
I'm just curious. Do you have a very clear recollection? You can remember it. You weren't like in a state of drunkenness or a state of haze or like a state of like some type of shock. You literally remember walking out. You remember everything.
Yeah, I remember everything. It's a very unique experience because it wasn't something that I felt like I could control. It was it was a very profound urge to do it. It's not that I could have stopped myself. It was that wasn't even an option, or even I wasn't even on a planet that stopping myself was a thing.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just what you did.
Yeah. It was very robotic. very controlled and not me. And I went and did it, and I was there. My wife, who, no reason she should have loved me or even been having any emotional intelligence to realize that I had been talking funny. She goes looking for me, and she comes out and into the garage, and obviously she sees exactly what you think she sees, and runs over to me, grabs me by the waist, and lifts me up. And as far as haziness and daze, yeah, I mean, I describe it in the book a little bit, but what it is was, there's a little, you've all felt a little bit of it. It's like you're getting choked out, the carotid artery, you get the white wisps and the things popping around your eyes, it's blurring. There's a little added thing to it, and it's the immense pressure of your body on your neck. And that's the part that I don't think I appreciated, but I did it wrong, because you're supposed to do that and drop.
Right.
And it fractures, and that
breaks your neck, right?
Yeah, it breaks your neck and causes an supposedly instantaneous is the way it, but I didn't do it right,
Right. And so yours was kind of more by strangulation then.
Yeah.
Right.
She was able to get me out of there. As far as recollection, it's weird. I actually thought I was successful. And
really?
Yeah, it's the best. You've seen Groundhog Day and movies like Sixth Sense and Groundhog Day. It felt a lot like that, where I was like, well, maybe she came out there and got me, but it was after the fact, and this is just my personal hell now.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was weird. It was, I mean, I had ideations previous to this where I was like, I'm going to do it. And then I would, like I popped pills like a few years before that. And I don't know that I really had the idea that I wanted to actually kill myself, but I knew that like maybe somebody would find me or I would tell somebody. But when it came to this, I did it. Like I did it. And so I didn't have a context for being rescued.
Right.
Like that wasn't in that.
And then the plan.
Yeah. What is that? And it was weird. They put me on this. So obviously I have to go through medical and mental rehabilitation for a long time. And during that process, but I ended up in a place where I was like talking to audiences all over the country, like going as like a speaker, and it's weird because like I wasn't healed, and I'm sitting here talking to people, and all I was seeing was moms coming and speaking to me going like, why did my son do it? Or why did my husband do it? Yeah. And so it added to this weird feeling of, oh, I'm not just in a personal hell. I'm in a personal hell where I'm going to have to relive vicariously through other people. I'm going to have to see their pain and realize the cost I did on my family. And really felt like I was in some sort of matrix where everything was an illusion. Like my wife, she would like, if she interacted with me, I was like, this is just hell. And very, very strange. And it took me years to get out of that.
And what, I'm just curious. So post that literal day, night, whatever that was, did you go to an inpatient facility? Was it, I guess, what was available? What did you do?
Well, I went to the VA is where they took me. So I went to the VA, and man, I tell you what, I walked in there and you get a lot of people. And now that I'm in counseling and I've done probably 1,000 crisis calls and done counseling for years, I see it from their perspective. But when I walked in there, you get a lot of, I'm going to do it, or I thought about doing it. You don't get a lot of, I did it.
Right.
And in fact, if you do get a, I did it, I'm pretty much a lightning in a bottle. It's 1 in a billion, because even the people who survived like I did have cognitive issues the rest of their life. Some of them are blind, or they have.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Right. It's very rare to be okay after surviving this, but you can survive it. You're just it's about a 5 to 11% chance. And then 90% of those are just 24/7 care. So to walk in there and say that, their faces just turned white, and they just looked at me, and they were, because my wife's with me. She brings me in there, and I say, I hung myself. And that's not something that those people are used to hearing.
Right.
So yeah, they got me all taken care of right away. And I was, I wasn't as bad off as I could have been. I think my wife getting out there as fast as she did, which we don't know exactly. Doctors say it's going to be anywhere from 4 to 20 seconds is when she got out there. So,
oh, wow. That's okay. So very quick.
Yeah, very quick. But, when you're dealing with a strangle, a carotid artery, you have about that long before you lose consciousness. And then
Right.
you may not die for another 2, 3, 4 minutes. You may, I know a guy who hung for 25 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, he's blind now, but he was able to survive after 25 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. But you lose consciousness and you lose the ability to rescue yourself after a very short time. And so unless somebody finds you, you will eventually die regardless.
Right.
So yeah, there was a little bit of physical care. That's actually, at the time, I didn't have a beard. I grew the beard at that time just to cover up the marks, and I've kept it ever since, kind of as not necessarily as a reminder, but just it's something. It's a conversation piece.
Yeah.
And
so you still have those marks?
No,
Okay.
It wasn't that bad. I think if I would have done a rope, an actual that
you'd still have the
Yeah, I think so. But an electrical cord, it just kind of just left like a red and purple for a little bit, and it was pretty bad, but it was like a hickey,
right?
But no scar. So yeah, and the aftercare took a long time. And the cognitive part of it was harder than anything, because the doctors were fighting with somebody who was like, I thought I was dead. I'm like, so what are you telling me? They're telling me these things, and I'm like, and it was all really, and not to be harsh on doctors, but it was all really, to me, it just didn't connect what they were saying.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, I mean, that's the story. At least that's the story up to a point,
Yeah, that's the story up to your point. Aaron, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't think I've ever cried during a podcast, and I am more sad right now than I have ever been, and not sad from I'm surprised. Emotion usually doesn't get the best of me, but I'm just so sorry that you were in that. I'm sorry that anybody has to suffer that much, and I just feel so deeply, right? I don't even know what I feel. I just feel deeply, if that makes sense. So I just really honor you for coming on and just talking. We don't know each other, we're strangers, other than I saw you on Facebook. So I just appreciate what you're doing in the world, but I really appreciate your authenticity.
Right.
It's almost like it's a relief hearing you tell your story. It lets some of the pressure out of my own balloon, right? If that makes sense. I guess it doesn't necessarily have to make sense, but I wanted just to appreciate what you're putting out there, and why I was called to have you on the show, I guess. So
yeah, I can really appreciate that. And I'll tell you, your reaction is very, it's very similar to what I see a lot of. And yeah, I mean, yours is unique to you though.
Right. Of course. Yeah. No, but it's an emotional response people have to your story.
Yeah. It's an emotional response. And that's where the problem happens.
Okay.
And that's what I was starting. So I told you before that I became a crisis counselor shortly after this.
Yeah.
And what I was finding was that the emotional response by people for this subject and for this topic was part of the virus of it.
Interesting.
And yeah, it was, I began to start noticing that suicide started to look more like a genocide to me. And each character that came into the play, like myself, go tell a story, and it would impact somebody, and then they were doing fine, but then maybe they would deal with an issue down the road, and they would have to end up, working on some of their own things after the fact, because all we did was we created a situation where we allowed our emotions to rule us, just like I allowed my emotions to rule me when I created the suicide to begin with. But when I was telling the story, in a way, I was helping people dig a shovel, or give, like I say in the book, give them one more step to their own. And so when people have an emotional reaction, I pulled myself back and I said, I got to stop. I got to stop speaking. I got to stop speaking, because people people will always have the emotional. Your response is not wrong. You had a genuine response. You're supposed to have it, but if you're supposed to have it, we have to deal with it now. We can't just let you have that emotional experience and go like, figure it out, bro. You know,
Right.
it's just
Yes.
not,
Yes.
it's not fair to you, because now
Right.
you have a story right now that you have to deal with.
Mhm.
And what happened for me, I was in, because after all this, I get, I'm in care. I'm in a facility and they're working with
Mhm.
my mind.
Mhm.
And one of the doctors, he was a foreign gentleman. I don't know the country he was from. All he told me was the country he grew up in was in civil war his whole life.
Right.
And he said, I got to go see people too. And I was like, you're my doctor. Why you got to go see people? You're helping me.
Right.
But it triggered something in me where I was like, oh, hold on. If the doctors have to see people, why am I out there talking to all of these people, not handling myself, but also giving people something to deal with that they don't have the faculties to go take care of? I
Mhm.
could be hurting people.
Interesting.
And so I stopped speaking publicly, and I said, you know what, I've got to figure out how to heal properly,
Mhm.
not just be aware of my pain, but I need to heal from it. And if I am going to be this 1 in a billion story that came off of a rope and lived and also has cognitive function,
Mhm.
we have to honor that gift as not just for me, but for everybody. And
Mhm.
we have to do it correctly. And that means I've got to find out how to heal myself, so that when I tell this story, I don't leave people with a
There.
leash. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So that's where the book comes in. And that's where a lot of the stuff came in, is like, I took notes for 10 years. I did more crisis negotiations and crisis calls, and took
Mhm.
notes, and just learned the human mind as best I could. Albeit it was in a very high pressure situation, because if I had a bad day on a crisis negotiation, I would lose somebody.
Oh
So,
yeah. Right.
uh,
Yeah.
um,
So you were still losing people even. It was almost like, I don't know. It almost sounds like you were trying to figure out, yeah, how to not lose people, right? Almost
yeah.
like a formula for how to not lose people. I had a friend about, and I'm sure you hear these stories too, but it was about probably 8 years ago that took his own life, and
Hmm.
he was fairly close to me. And at that time, I remember hearing something about the indicator for if you will take your own life. The greatest indicator of if you will take your own life is if you know somebody close to you who's taken their own life. That's why a lot of times kids of parents who have committed suicide commit suicide. And I never knew that until my friend took his own life. And I was just like, and to what you're talking about, it is interesting how that played with my mind, how that, kind of, if even seeing what it did kind of to his family, um, it still played with my mind. To your point, I don't know that I knew how to process. I didn't know how to process it. Right. I never had that
Yeah.
happen before.
Yeah. It's very difficult, because your emotions are a chemical. It's a drug.
Right.
You're drugging yourself, and you're
Hmm.
becoming addicted to a certain drug. And through neuroplasticity, the more and more and more you have that drug, the more and more you want it. And
Hmm.
so when you first hear that story, when you first heard my story,
Hmm.
you now have to cope with the fact that there is you have to deal with it. You have to
Right.
decide, what are you going to do with this
Do with
story?
that. Yep.
Yeah. And so in the back half of the book, I tell the story in the back half of the book is, here's how I dealt with it. These are
Hmm.
the steps I took to work with it. And here's what you need to do now from this, and then everything. And by the end of the book, you should just be like, gotcha. I should not be able to manipulate your emotions by the end of the book, and I
Hmm.
don't try to, but if there's something in the back of the book after you've read it and you've done everything properly, if there's a part that gets you emotionally charged, read the book again until you
Hmm.
fall asleep, you know?
Really?
Yeah, read it until you fall asleep, because it bores you. And once it bores you, you win. So,
I like that philosophy. How long did how long did it take to write this book, I guess? And what was so obviously I just want to connect some dots just in
mhm.
general, but you know, so you're doing these crisis calls, you're doing that for a living? Is that, I mean, you did that as a job then?
A little bit. No, I hosted a TV show back in the day on Sportsum Channel, and I worked with Cabela's, and that's what it was we were
No.
just it was part of my social media, and then we had an organization. We had a 501c3, and we had
Mhm.
training, and where we would do crisis calls, and yeah, I would get 2 or 3 calls a night, and some of them were phone, some of them I actually I'd go into bars and pull dudes out, and if they were local. but I would take a couple calls a day, and I wasn't getting paid for it. It was just something I did.
Part of the right.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. And the book itself. So this book took 1 month to write.
Wow.
But, yeah.
That's fast.
Well, but I had 10 years of notes.
Right.
So, I mean, I've been journaling for 10 months, and I do teach people how to journal in the book if they don't journal. And I kept a journal for this whole time. And so I was able to pull from the journal. But it's also not fair to say it took a month, because 3 years ago, a Hollywood production company came to me and said they wanted to do a story about my life. And I rejected that for a while, but finally their approach was very cool. I said, let's do it. They said, yeah, we're going to do it. And then they hit me with you got to write a book. And I was like, all right. So I wrote a whole book, 50,000 words, whatever, wrote a whole book, but the movie's going to take forever to come out. And they were like, well, we don't want you to release the book yet. So just kind of hold on to it. And I was like, well, how long? Like, oh, it could be another 2-3 years. And I was like, all right, well, Wichita State University calls me and they want me to do a keynote speech in January. And this was December, or it was February. They wanted me to speak in February, and this was December. They said, hey, could you speak in February? I said, sure, I'll speak. What do you want me to speak about? And then, well, we're doing a mental health workshop. And I was like, sweet. Well, my book is a life story. That's not really a keynote speech. And these were like career people. And I was like, well, I was like, how do I do this on a business context? And so in about, a month, I rewrote the book to where I had basic principles of how to do this. And then at the keynote, I was able to take the principles from this book of like, hey, once you save your life and work with your emotions, you have to pass the finish line and go on to other things like business. So here's how you can use some of these principles in business or ministry or whatever you want to do. They still continue today in pursuits where you're not trying to hang yourself.
Right.
And so this book took about a month.
But you have, to your point, there's lots of material. And so are we going to see a Hollywood movie in the future?
Yep. In fact,
is that right?
Yeah, I have a meeting next week. The movie has been in the works for about 3 years.
Right.
But now I studied at Sony Studios in Hollywood. I'm a film producer. I've done a lot of that stuff.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I know that, and I'm not like advanced in it. I'm not like great. Nobody's hiring me for it. I just have done it. But I do know in the industry, it's going to be years on a movie. It could be another 2 years
before they get it shot or start shooting or something like that.
Yeah. So what they did was there's 4 projects. That initial book I wrote, which is not released yet, and the movie, which is not released yet, those go together. This book, which, that one, the book, we're talking about, has a documentary that starts actually really soon here. And that should be out this year.
Oh, okay.
And that documentary, I keep waiting. I wish I was allowed to announce who's going to be doing the documentary. It's one of the top 3. I'm just not allowed to say it yet. One of the top 3 streamers is going to have it. It's going really well. And what they're doing in the documentary is I do a speaking tour. I go around the country. I speak at universities, colleges. I do, but I also go to talk to companies. I help people do a thing called Flow State University, where I teach them to jump into flow state, which is it's the zone in sports.
Yep.
So I help people with that. I help businesses work. And I do a lot of this counseling and consulting. So they're going to follow me around all the way up to leading up to a group called Camel Neuroscience in San Diego, who is going to be studying my brain because they believe they have found a protein that can solve suicide.
Really?
Yeah. And they have done their control groups. They've done their studies. They're moving forward. But like I said, my brain is rare. We don't have a lot of people who have cognitive function and survived, survived and have cognitive function. And so they said, we finished everything, but let's get your brain on radar, whatever, and see what we can come up with and see if it helps. And so the documentary will be following all of that. And it will hopefully a lot of things will be answered. We won't leave people with just a sad story where they got to go home and think about how, Yeah, well, like you now, what I would encourage you is you've heard the story now. The issue now is you have to deal with that. You have to start working on your own, just like me. People ask me all the time, like, what was it like to be on, hang myself. And I tell people it was a 5-year-old boy that did it. It wasn't the 33-year-old man.
Right.
And so for you hearing the story, you have to now go back and go, all right, what are some of the things I'm not dealing with? You may not be as far advanced as I was in your suffering, but all people have suffering.
Right.
And that can be if you have a favorite sports team, you technically have suffering,
right, when they don't win.
Yeah. It just,
right.
and the way you see it is that, let's say you're a Dodgers fan and a Padres fan walks in the room and you guys bicker back and forth. That is a form of suffering. It's playful, but in some countries they murder people because of it.
Right.
So what I have to do now is when I speak, I have to be careful. I have to do this whole story. Then I say, all right, you've got more work to do now. And even if it's not for you, even if you're not the one who's struggling, somebody around you might. And here's the tools to help with them, and that's kind of that's the story, man. It's just, we've all got things we're dealing with. Let's deal with them. If you think you're not dealing with them, at least read the book and maybe you can help somebody else out.
Right. And typically what would you recommend for, people what are some resources, I guess, for people that are dealing with that amount of suffering or an extreme amount of suffering? Counseling?
Yeah. I mean, you've always got to start with counseling if you can't, because, even myself, I may think that I have the answer, and I do believe I have the answer and the cure, but I'm one person. I can't talk to 1,000 people. So even my answer came, like I said before, that doctor who said I have to go see somebody too. Had I not run into a doctor who said that, who knows?
Right.
So even I had to go to somebody to begin with and get started with somebody. That's one of the reasons why I did the book too, because counseling, I'm lucky. I'm a disabled veteran, so I don't have to pay $180 an hour to go see a counselor. I can go do it for free at the VA. Not everybody has that option, right. Even some of these online companies now that'll help you out, it's still expensive. And so I wrote the book because I'm like, look, $20, it'll get you started. It'll get you started. If you're struggling really bad and it's like, no, I'm going to do it tonight, you got to get in. You got to get some help ASAP, because you're not going to read a 4-hour read.
Right.
It won't put you to sleep. Maybe you'll just do it tomorrow. But you've got to get in and see somebody ASAP. Do not sleep on this. It's not something to sleep on, because when it came time for me to do it, there was no stopping me. There was no phone call that would help me. There was no, my son, my wife came out there, but my son saw it. My son came out. Yeah, he came out there right after her to follow her. He was only 3 years old at the time.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
But there's nothing that would have stopped me. I had children. I was married. I seemed okay in life to other people, and I still did it. And just because you say, well, I've got it under control, I'm fine, it ain't gonna happen. It ain't like that. This is, in the book, I call it the ineffable, because for me to even describe the emotion that I was under would be an insult to its power. You can't beat it. You absolutely cannot beat it at all.
And when you say beat it, you can't beat it and by yourself. You can't beat it. Like, give me some context. In the moment. Got it.
In the moment. You will not beat, when it comes for you, you will not beat it in the moment.
Right. So, and that's why you're saying address it now before it gets to that point. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I've had another guest come on the show and talk about kind of inherited trauma. Like, if your parents had trauma and it wasn't resolved, or if you're in a case he gave on the show, his grandparent that, that this granddaughter had never even met, had unresolved trauma, and it actually generational trauma, right? It actually passed through the lineage. And she was actually cutting herself, and it had nothing to do with anything that she had ever done in her life. It was actually her grandmother's unresolved trauma and it actually attaches to the DNA as a tag and passes through. So, in that show, and you'd said this earlier, even if you don't do it for yourself, do it for others. But, when we were talking that show, basically I had the realization, if I don't address my stuff, right, or address the stuff I have to address, whether it's mine or I've inherited it, I then by default, if I don't, my kids inherit whatever it is that I don't deal with. That's just the reality. And that changed my brain a little bit, or shifted a little bit of, I need to dive deeper into, for me, it was like God and spirituality and
Yeah.
who's Jesus Christ and who's God and
Yeah.
what's the Bible about. And I found some peace and comfort and guidance in the Bible. But
Yeah.
I know for other people, it's other stuff, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
meditation or contemplation or,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, I think it's from my own perspective, I think men, do a worse job of dealing with it because we're so good at compartmentalizing it, right? We put it in that little box in the basement, and we think that nobody's ever going to play with that box, and that nobody's ever going to open the lid on that. And then it's too, in your case, it was too late, right? I mean, it was like you didn't have the tools or the ability to process what was in the box, right? And so I think men, we don't do a very good job emotionally of processing much, right? I mean, typically we pack it away.
Yeah, 100%. And you said something that reminded me when you said the lineage. There's that's not just philosophical. There's emerging studies. I think they have a study where they looked into rats, and they had a problem with cherries, and they traced it 16 different 16 generations in rats in the study. And never being, the way they did it was the rats were never introduced to cherries until later on, and sure enough, they, through the 16 generations, their DNA, because your DNA, your cellular system in your entire body does have a consciousness and awareness. When people say like, I have a gut feeling, that's real. Like, and there's science to back that. And so if your father or somebody has, and you'll hear sins of the father,
right?
It's and even when you talk about scripture and reconnecting, or in my case, connecting to at all to God at that point was allowed me to define some of the things I saw in science as well at the same time. When I saw like a study of 16 generations with rats, I was like, well, that's kind of like sins of the father type stuff,
right. 7 generations, right? That's a biblical principle and principle in other spiritual practice. So and to some degree, it almost when I kind of heard that, and I'd heard 7 generation, all this other stuff, but when I heard there was scientific evidence that they had linked it, like literally they can look at a DNA, and I can't remember which strands it is, but it creates these little tags, these little ears or whatever you want to call them, and it literally, they can say, oh, this is tagged to that. Now they can't necessarily say what the trauma is, they can just see that there's trauma there. But I was like, okay, well, part of it was like, okay, this isn't just my stuff, right? So there was a little bit of sense of relief of, oh, it's okay if I feel sad, or if I feel confused, or if I feel a little depressed, or so, because it's not all just mine, but then it is mine to do something with, right? It doesn't lessen the responsibility, but it does feel less like it's almost like it's part of the process of me living is the bridge between like my father and my son, right? I'm kind of the how much of the stuff that my father wasn't able to process am I able to process, so that my son doesn't have to, he can maybe be born into freedom where, my father and I were born into bondage, right? Type thing. So,
that's powerful that you say that, because I think you're actually tapping into a hidden, it's not hidden, but it's one of the main concepts of why I wrote the book, because I had a son sitting in the doorway watching me do this. So guess what? And you saying that, it's like, okay, well, I'm already teaching my children some of the principles in the book, and my oldest is 14, and he's already going through, and I'm teaching them these things because when I was 14, I was struggling with them, just like you're talking about, your father and beyond. It's we have to take this message and help those around us. And make sure that we're looking after them, because what I don't want is I don't want people to all of a sudden come up to something and be like, where did this trauma come from? I don't have a problem with cherries, but it's because your father did. And so one of the practices in there is I do a little bit of metacognition, which is, that's just you. If you daydream, how to do metacognition. It's the same thing. It's you being aware of your daydreaming and focusing back on attention. Except for me, I focused it on a process called Name It, Tame It, which is it's a study from the 70s done by a clinical psychiatrist at UCLA. And all it does is you take an emotion, like let's just take my hanging. Me hanging myself caused anger, grief, sadness, Anything, I start naming off the emotions, and I take them and I just put it up and I draw a picture and I make it like a movie, and I actually envision what it looked like, like that's what it looked like. These are the emotions that went into it. And then I take those and I organize them and I put them into like a neighborhood, and that neighborhood becomes what's called self-schema, which self-schema is the why you are who you are. So if somebody calls me a Marine, it's because I went to Parris Island, South Carolina, and then Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And that's the why of the who, which is the Marine. So the emotions, the visual of me in the garage doing what I did is the why I am the who of the suicide survivor. And so once I organized the schema, I was then able to organize the who, which is the self-concept or our ego. And so the whole trick of the book is, and this is what shocks people when I speak, the greatest thing I ever did was kill myself. For one, what happened after I killed myself in the practical sense of, the physical sense, is I went on a, speaking tour. I also went on crisis calls. And though I wasn't successful every time, in almost 1,000, there's 900 plus people who are possibly alive because of that. So in that aspect, great, but it still doesn't feel right. So you look at what I had to do later with my mind and self-schema and self-concept was I had to take my ego, look at it and realize this is why I was struggling with what I was struggling. My ego told me that because I was a Marine, I should define all things like this. I had pre-filled forms for how I should react to things because I was a Marine, or I was a baseball guy, or I was this. Once I killed that self, I was free. And that again goes back to scripture. To live is Christ, to die is gain. And I never knew it. I thought that just meant, well, that just means I should do good things. But really, I just had to actually kill the concept of self and pull it back and go like, no, it is literally pulling that back and understanding. And then when I did that, I was now able to take every thought captive. I was able to be transformed by daily renewing my mind. All these scriptures that were just like some pastor talking from a pulpit were just like, what does he mean by that? And all of a sudden I was like, oh, it's literally just this. That's amazing. It's right here.
It all made sense, right?
It did.
Once you unlock the code or something, right?
Yeah. It felt like a cheat code. And I was like, what? So so that's what it was. It's a book about what I learned after I killed myself. And people think I'm talking about the physical, but no, it's when I killed the concept of self, the ego, and drew that back and decided to live my life for a kingdom principle, but also for others. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, I literally just took that and said, like, that is it. That's the thing.
Right.
That's the thing to do. So
the greatest commandment in the law.
Yeah. That's what this book is. It's just my interpretation of it, but also save your life, hopefully.
Right. Save your, yes, in a way, yes. Save your life, but really save your life, not just save your physical life, right? Yeah,
exactly. That's what it is. You save the physical life, but also find that the whole thing of, the connection to God, that partnership with him, which the partnership was in the garden originally, which was ruined by us when, when we, took of the fruit. It's that partnership that we're always trying to get back to.
Right.
And this was how I found my way back to that partnership.
Well, that's an amazing story. And obviously I wanted to have you come on the show because I think it's so important, your message, and certainly support. I mean, and we talked pre-show, but your whole mission is supported by the book sales, right? By the distribution of the book. So this is, buying the book, is supporting your message, I guess. It's almost like I feel like I'm donating, right? I'm donating and I get a book, right? It's almost, right? I'm donating to your cause and I get a book. That's great. I donate $20 and send me a book.
In a way, yeah.
Right. But this is how you fund your mission. This is how you fund your work. And I so appreciate that that's, you're using your message to pay it forward, to carry it forward, and hopefully it's carrying you. Hopefully that's a reciprocal relationship where your message is also supporting you, because that's a beautiful symbiotic relationship.
Oh yeah, it is beautiful, and I learned it the hard way was not taking care of my family. When I first did the crisis calls, I didn't take care of my family in the back end, and it'll cost me dearly. So this time, what I do is, the $20, you buy $20 book, you get a book. What that allows me to do is, for one, travel around the country, but two, I take a couple people and I counsel them for free. People that can't go to the VA, that can't pay $180 an hour for counseling, I counsel them for free. So if they're really struggling, and usually somebody will direct somebody to me and say, hey, this person is, I say, okay, well, let's work with them, and then they're not going to pay for it, and we're gonna work. And that's what the book sales do, is it allows me to have that time where I'm away from my family, still be able to honor my family, but also honor these people who need help, and not make them have to come out of pocket for it. So
beautiful.
Your $20 may be helping somebody.
Yeah. Perfect. No, I love it. Love it. And please come back on when, when the documentary gets ready to release, when you've got new projects, just reach out to me, let me know. And we'd love to have you come back on the show and talk about the stuff. This BriteVibe podcast is a way that I feel I can connect with people who have a valuable message to give to the world. And I get to help, give that message some wings. We have about 10,000 people will listen to this show over the next 6 months. That's 10,000 people that were impacted by your story. So that's kind of my way of giving back. I don't make any money off this show, to be honest with you. But I still do it because I believe that it's so important to put not just positive, but very tangible, positive, solution-based information out so that people can find solutions to their life. It's not just a quick fix. This is a different way of living, right?
Yeah.
Not just an instruction manual for how to manage your grief. It's like, how do you transcend your grief and actually become free, right? Right?
Yeah. And meeting people like you, we all work together, because for one, if I may have a story, but if I'm not on your podcast, your people don't hear it, but also your message, what you're doing just in of yourself is powerful too, because there needs to be more people like that, is what I'm getting at. There needs to be more people that are saying, look, that was one of the reasons why I really liked the idea of coming on here with you, because you first talked, I looked and it said BriteVibe, and I was like, all right, that feels like it's in line with where I'm at. Right. So
it's raise the vibration, right? Raise the vibration, right? Live a higher vibration, right? That's what that means.
Yeah, I like that. And that's, I think there should be more of that. But if there's not going to be, at least you're out there in the forefront, on the front lines doing it. And I appreciate you for that. And I thank you for who you are and what you're doing. And I hope that there will be more of that for the future. I hope that this expands for you even greater.
I appreciate that. I'll take that intention. I appreciate that. And so hopefully we'll run into each other somewhere in the, we still live in the same city right now. Like I said, we've never met, but hopefully we run into each other. Let me know when you're talking somewhere. I'll come and be in the audience and listen. And I know some other people I think would love the message, and it's such a powerful message and has such a broad audience out there. So I can definitely see, I think you've got a long runway in front of you as well.
Well, I hope so. But we worry about the present moment right now, whatever God has for us tomorrow, He has for us. But right now, it is the present moment, and you're doing what you can. I'm doing what I can, and we will run into each other. We will, one way or the other, it'll happen. So.
Sure enough. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on. Again, the book is This Is What I Learned After I Killed Myself. It's available on Amazon, and I'm sure at other book resellers, but Amazon's the easy way to go get that. So go out and buy a copy and pay it forward, share it with somebody, or read it yourself or whatever, but let's pay it forward. So thank you so much, Aaron, for coming on, and we appreciate what you're doing out there.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.